book discussion in Ascension by Martin MacInnes. The book is about a lady that is a marine biologist. It's a science fiction book, so there is talk about discovering new life in the depths of the ocean, and then there is talk about finding ways to create nutrition, algae in particular, that can last and grow very long in a very specific way. And all of this culminates into a very long space voyage where a crew is flying somewhere far and is trying to depict actually intelligence. So there's this suspicion by mission control that there's possibility that Earth is getting messages from somewhere, and this crew is supposed to go there and figure out what's going on. So that's kind of the story. I want to say three things about this novel. First, it's the genre of science fiction as a genre doesn't really please me, because I just can't help but sense scientism there. In other words, what I mean with scientism is this tacit agreement amongst the writer and the people who read that kind of stuff, that scientists are the people that really drive the world forward, that make things happen. They're the geniuses. They're, the Einsteins of this world. They solve the big problems and move humanity further. And I don't agree with that. I don't think it's a scientist at all. I think scientists are, in my opinion, highly paid mechanical Turk workers. Intellectual mechanical Turk, yes, difficult stuff, but they're not, at least not in our system today with academia. This is a very low risk and uninspiring activity, actually. Now, as a whole, they usually produce something every now and then that can be used by entrepreneurs and engineers, and those are really the drivers of the game. The people like Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, they drive our society forward. The second thing I wanted to say is the good thing about the novel, I think, where Martin really does a good job, is sort of bringing the human aspect of this space travel odyssey. And I think, to me, it's really relevant because, we're talking about flying to Mars anytime soon with SpaceX. And therefore, I think there's a good chance that we're actually going to be in a situation like that pretty soon. And it's the human aspect. I'm going to elaborate what I mean with that. I think third, as I always do with novels, stylistically, technically, so the techniques, the style, the sort of narrative, for the novelist in me, what do I think about this? I think the story is very boring, really. And I think that's a lot of science fiction stories are like that, because they lose me at some point. I don't care about how the cabin is structured and the oxygen refueling. Like, they get lost in this technical jargon because they have to. I know, let's say, Sean Carroll is advising often for movies, and I think for books too. So physicists, scientists are advising these people in, let's say, how does a oxygen recycling method work in a spaceship, and I'm just not too interested. And I think they often lose themselves in this type of narrative. So a lot of the narrative becomes about these things. How do the algae grow? What kind of genetic material do we need to grow algae? Like, it becomes, because there is this underlying tone of scientism, I think the narrator also feels like he or she, in this case, he has to show the world, look, I know what I'm talking about. And I think that's annoying. I think from a technique, again, the human aspect, though, the way he wrote about the actual psychological aspects of space travel, that was really powerful. It wasn't exactly the most interesting thing to me, again, because I'm not too interested in astronauts. To me, it's like talking about a bus driver, quite frankly. Like, yeah, it's fine, nothing wrong with bus driving, but do I want to write a novel about a bus driver? Maybe, but then I have to do a better job. And I think Martin, he did an okay job. Again, I gave it a 3-star overall rating on Amazon because the story is relatively boring. It kind of schleps and Again, lots of scientism, lots of aggrandizing of scientists, of importance of, you know, government secrets, missions, and like, I'm not into that. I feel like that's actually a big detriment to our society, that we're wasting money and giving people the kind of power that they have to do these kinds of things. This is not even on podcast. It's June 16, 2024. This is Krim Delco. It's a Sunday. There's no update for the year. We're down 3.9%. The market is up 13.9%. We're outperforming by 17.8%. Martin MacInnes in Ascension. It's a book about mission to space. Really far-reaching mission. There's some new technology that humanity has developed that has the ability to propel or you know, accelerate a spaceship 1,000 times faster than before, and we have the chance to go to a very, very far part of the solar system. And we also, Mission Control has received messages from very far from the solar system that allude towards intelligence. So there's this crew that is hired to actually go somewhere far and figure some stuff out and come back. The whole trip should be about 19 months. And the author talks a lot about how this works, the preparation, the necessities for a trip like that. And you know, let me start with the discussion, and actually let me start with the psychological part since I'm here. I think the author did a really good job in sort of describing the human aspect of a trip like that. For example, there are passages in the book where the main character, the marine biologist, she remembers, you know, colors. She remembers air, how it feels. She remembers conversations with her mom. There's, let's say, this virtual AI that is mimicking phone calls that the crew members can have with their family members, because Mission Control is paying a lot of attention to keep them mentally sane. So this mental well-being is really pushed to a next level here, and I think this is really important. It's important for space travel. It's also important, of course, for regular people on Earth, right? Mental health is important. Now, we can politicize it and turn it into some DEI bullshit, or we can just really embrace it and say, look, we're all in this together, and we wanna drive mental health towards a better place. And we do that by having all these little things. I think that Martin does a really good job in describing what it takes sometimes. It doesn't take thousands of dollars of therapy. It just takes maybe, you know, smelling real green leaves every now and then, taking a walk in the park, you know, maybe taking a swim in the ocean, having a conversation with a loved one, having a fight with the loved one. You know, fights can be healthy. Like, things like that are all over the book. And I really like that. And I think the author did a very, very good job. So Martin, I think he's not a science fiction writer. He's not as good as some other books that I read. I feel like he's a human writer. He's a humane writer. He's very good at, this is almost like an Anna Karenina level of psychology, of depth, of the humanity of things. And he did a really good job. He embedded this whole thing in a science fiction novel, which I think is a little bit unlucky, I think. Just maybe it's the wrong word. Because the second thing I want to talk about is the scientism, is the, in my opinion, appalling attitude towards science and these big missions and government grants and all this big stuff, this important stuff. You know, names aren't mentioned in the book, but you could sort of relate to today, like NASA and space travel and space agency and blah, blah, blah. You know what? These people are all overpaid mechanical Turk workers, in my opinion, which means they just execute. They don't take any risks. They're government employees. They're bureaucrats. They don't drive humanity further. They actually are even worse. They pull us back. I spoke about this in the context, let's say, of nuclear fusion, where I said fusion is illusion. Abundant energy is not. In other words, we can get better technologies. We can actually go to space. We can explore the world, but it's not going to be large government contracts and scientists with genius ideas that wrote a lot of papers. It's not those people who are going to move us forward. It's the entrepreneurs, the people that take the risk, the people that put blood, sweat, and tears into a work and execute and put their livelihood on the line. Those are the kinds of people that drive us forward. So I'm very much against this science fiction genre that depicts science in this sort of aggrandizing way. And I think what happens probably with people like Martin is they get consulted by scientists. They would go to, you know, a Caltech professor or MIT professor and get their you know, scientific advice from them. And what are they going to advise them? Well, oh, we're the geniuses. You know, we are the ones. We produce grad students that can move humanity forward. In reality, it's not true. What they do is they are like high school. They produce, you know, they give us education, which is a whole different problem. I'm actually just about to finish my essay, Peak Academia, and how we can fix academia, because I think there's a big problem that we're facing as a society, which is we're combining academia with knowledge creation. Academia, which in my opinion is turning into a monastery, a monastic, indoctrinated cabal of priests, but they also have knowledge creation under their hood, and that's a real problem, because people who want to drive our society forward, the Elon Musks of this world, they have to hire from those monasteries and then retrain the people. Now, most people, most students, even if they go to a place like Stanford or Berkeley or MIT, they're thankfully not indoctrinated totally. So they have this, you know, they're human beings, right? You can brainwash as much as you want. A human being is a human being. So most of these people just go there to get the knowledge, and they just play along with all the other BS that they have to deal with, the political stuff, just to get their knowledge, and then they can go to a place like Tesla or SpaceX and actually do real work. So I think, but why can't we separate those things? Why can't we have knowledge creation as a sort of standalone, you know, activity where people get also trained and educated in a more efficient way? You know, the byline of my essay is how can we free academia from Gowns, tuition, and ideology? Gowns being the hierarchy, the rigid hierarchies of academia, tuition, the high cost, and the ideology is the political indoctrination that students have to go through in top elite, particularly top elite U.S. universities. It's not so bad internationally. So all of that said is, I think the scientism, this type of, you know, intellectual aggrandizing of science and all of that comes across in this novel and in many other science fiction novels. And it's, lo and behold, I'm not surprised that people that have this view of themselves as being, you know, whatever, smart scientists, like, I don't know, Jan LeCun, Lex Friedman, those types who are very vocal about how proud they are to be a scientist and blah, blah. Those people are typically also the ones who rave about science fiction. So the last thing I want to say is now on a sort of more technical narrative, novelistic way. I think the author is using, it's a nice book, I think, in terms of, you know, there's a little bit of history, there's a little bit of drama, there's all of that stuff, but I think the big negative is the narrative, the tedious, technical, scientific elaborations on things that just aren't important. You know, this is like, imagine Jan LeCun talking to me about how convolutional neural nets are enabling FSD. I don't care. I'm sorry, I don't care. And the problem is, if I care, if I go to CVPR like I go tomorrow, then I care. I do care about the latest algorithm and the latest, but if it's a novel, I just don't care. And it just, I think what Martin did wrong here, he must have been advised by a scientifically, let's say, obsessed and maybe a bit aggrandizing scientist who took herself or himself way too seriously. That's my impression. So, but the technique that he used in depicting the humanity of space travel, I think, is amazing. So that's really good, and I think I wanna take this with me for you know, future books and things like that. I'm actually thinking of writing a short story or maybe even a novel. I'll see what happens. Maybe a script about a Terminator that comes back from the future to prevent Ben Bernanke from printing money, or maybe it's going to be also the creation of the Fed, something like that, because that is the sort of the roots of all the problems of our society, in my opinion, can be traced back to the creation of the Fed, and in particular Ben Bernanke's decision to print money and monetize debt. But again, that's a tangent. So to summarize, Martin MacInnes in Ascension, I give it a 3-star rating. So it's not great, but it's still, I think the human aspect of space travel is worth reading this book. I think he did a good job aggrandizing science, scientism in science fiction novels is annoying to me. So that's why I'm not a big fan of the genre. And I think from a technical perspective, you can see that these people, or this particular author, has been advised by scientists, and that's often the problem with science fiction novels. They get advised by scientists who then infiltrate their own aggrandized view of science, which I think is annoying. To me, science, again, it's mechanical Turk. It's useful as a whole army of scientists are working on problems, but they themselves are not the key drivers. The drivers are the entrepreneurs, the people who take the risk and execute science into technology and products. Thank you.